You are speaking your reality into existence right now, even if you believe you're only describing it. Each word that passes through your awareness, whether it's an intentional affirmation or an offhand remark, becomes a thread woven into the tapestry of your life. That casual sigh about being so unlucky, the repeated internal story about being bad with money, the half joking remark to a friend that good things never happen to you. None of these are neutral. They are not background noise. They are the very instructions your consciousness is feeding into the unseen machinery of reality. The voice in your head is not simply a commentator reading from a teleprompter. It is not the calm, detached voice of a weather reporter reciting today's conditions. It is an instrument of creation, a quantum force disguised as thought. Without your conscious consent, it has been shaping your inner and outer world, quietly drafting the script for the days, weeks, and years that follow. Right now, as these words reach you, your inner narrator is active, possibly weighing whether this makes sense, linking these ideas to past experiences, or planning how you might apply them. This voice has been your constant companion since childhood. It has narrated your victories, rationalized your failures, and interpreted every shade of human experience you've encountered. Over the years, its presence has become so familiar that you have stopped noticing it at all. But what if I told you this inner voice is not an impartial witness? What if, instead, it is actively constructing the world you inhabit? Every mental habit, every repeated self-definition, every way you choose to frame your life is like a set of blueprints handed to the architect of the quantum field, the invisible structure that underlies all physical existence. Through this field, possibility itself takes form. This is not mere metaphor. In the early 20th century, physicists made a discovery so unsettling it shook the foundations of science. The act of observation changes the outcome of events. The now famous experiments on quantum particles revealed that reality does not exist in a fixed, predetermined state. Instead, it exists in a haze of potential until it is observed, until consciousness interacts with it. In other words, the observer does not just watch reality happen. The observer is a participant in deciding which reality will unfold. Most people live inside a feedback loop they never even notice. They experience circumstances, describe them through habitual internal language, and in doing so, reinforce the very conditions they wish would change. Like a potter unknowingly shaping clay into the same vessel over and over, they repeat their reality without understanding why. The truth is that the observer and the observed are two aspects of the same living process. They are locked in a seamless dance, so tightly interwoven that changing one immediately transforms the other. Here lies the first great shift. The moment you understand that your observer voice is not describing reality, but creating it, you hold in your hands the most advanced manifestation technology ever discovered, your own awareness. When wielded with intention, it becomes a scalpel, cutting away old patterns, or a chisel, sculpting new ones into being. This goes far beyond the cliches of positive thinking or the surface-level use of affirmations. It is not about slapping a happy sticker over a difficult truth. It is about recognizing that consciousness itself is participatory, that the quality of your observation affects the quality of what appears in your life. The ancient Stoics hinted at this truth when they taught that we suffer not from events, but from our judgment of them. Mystics across cultures, from the Hindu seers who spoke of Maya, the illusory nature of the world, to the Zen masters who teach the art of pure witnessing, have long understood that perception is an act of creation. Now, quantum physics has placed a modern scientific frame around the same ancient insight. How you witness your life is the blueprint for how your life unfolds. Whether you watch it through the fogged glass of fear, the open window of curiosity, or the stained lens of resentment, the reality you see will match the lens you use. And while you may not have consciously chosen the lens you are currently looking through, since much of it was inherited from family, culture, and survival experience, you now have the power to change it. In the chapters ahead, we will dive into the mechanics of this mystery. You will see how each moment is shaped by the ongoing conversation in your mind. You will understand why observation is not passive, but formative. And most importantly, you will discover that this observer voice is not fixed. It is a skill, a craft, an art that you can refine. Every waking moment, whether you're aware of it or not, you're running an internal broadcast. It's not just random chatter. It's an ongoing transmission into the very fabric of the universe. This broadcast is your observer voice, and it operates with the consistency and reach of a powerful radio station. The signal it sends isn't made of sound waves. It's made of thought, belief, and attention. Consider your first waking moments in the morning. Long before your feet touch the floor, your observer voice is already at work. Another Monday. I'm still so tired. I hope today is better than yesterday. These aren't neutral observations. They are vibrational commands sent to the quantum field, the invisible arena where all potential outcomes exist before they solidify into experience. In essence, the first thoughts you entertain are like a morning broadcast, setting the tone and frequency for everything that follows. This is why quantum scientists have long been fascinated by the famous double-slit experiment. In its simplest form, the test shows that particles, tiny building blocks of matter, don't behave like fixed bits of reality. They exist as waves of possibility until they are observed. The moment observation occurs, the wave collapses into a defined outcome. The implication is staggering. Observation is not a passive act. It is a determining force. And if this is true at the smallest scale of existence, what does it mean for the entire architecture of our lives? Your internal voice is your personal version of this experiment. Every thought, every self-narrated story is an act of observation that collapses one version of your reality into existence from the infinite options available. When you say, "I never meet the right people," you're not merely stating an opinion. You're selecting a reality where that pattern continues. When you say, "Good things happen to me unexpectedly," you are tuning yourself to a very different set of possibilities. Think of your consciousness as a radio dial. Each frequency corresponds to a set of experiences waiting to be accessed. If your observer voice habitually tunes to stations of scarcity, self-doubt, or conflict, those will be the experiences you amplify and receive. And here's the extraordinary part. Most people don't realize they can change the station at will. Instead, they inherit their default settings from parents, peers, cultural conditioning, or early experiences. Like a record stuck in an endless loop, they replay the same emotional tracks, wonder why life feels repetitive, and assume the problem lies in the external world. But in reality, the loop is an echo of their own broadcast. You can see this principle play out in subtle yet powerful ways. Imagine walking into a room full of strangers. If your observer voice murmurs, "No one here will like me," you unconsciously adjust your body language, avoiding eye contact, keeping your tone guarded, choosing a seat in the corner. Those micro choices then shape how others respond, often confirming your initial fear. From the outside, it looks like bad luck or a cold environment. In truth, your internal frequency set the conditions for that reality before you exchanged a single word. The good news, and it is very good news, is that this broadcasting system is not fixed. Your observer voice is not a genetic destiny or an unchangeable personality trait. It is a skill that can be refined, a finely tuned instrument you can learn to play with precision. This is where quantum awareness meets conscious craftsmanship, the deliberate practice of selecting your frequency, not by faking positivity, but by choosing an expansive, empowered point of view that naturally alters the field of possibilities available to you. In the coming sections, we will explore not just how this works in theory, but how you can apply it in daily life, shifting from a passive consumer of circumstances to an active conductor of reality. You will see how even a small change in the signal you send can set off a chain of effects that transforms both your inner state and the external world that responds to it. The way you see the world is not just a reflection of reality. It's a blueprint for how reality will respond to you. Every moment, your observer voice scans the environment, interpreting faces, tones, events, and opportunities through the filter of your expectations. That filter is powerful enough to determine which doors appear open, which seem locked, and which you never even notice. Take a simple example. You step into a gathering where you know almost no one. If your observer voice says, "I don't belong here," your entire system shifts in response. Your posture closes, your gaze drops, your smile fades to something tight and guarded. You might hover on the edges of the room, avoid introducing yourself, or retreat into your phone. Those around you, reading your body language, may mirror your distance, unaware that they're participating in a loop you've unconsciously initiated. Before long, you leave thinking, "See, I knew I didn't fit in here." The belief wasn't confirmed by objective reality. It was constructed and then validated by the interaction between your broadcast and the environment. This phenomenon is not limited to social situations. It plays out in job interviews, romantic encounters, financial decisions, even in how you interpret the news. Your observer voice is like a spotlight. It illuminates certain details and leaves others in shadow. The danger is that over time, you forget that you're holding the spotlight. You start believing that the parts you see are all there is. Here's the transformative insight. The observer voice is not a fixed identity. It's not encoded into your DNA or welded permanently into your personality. It is a skill. And like any skill, it can be developed, refined, and strengthened with practice. In truth, it has always been adapting, absorbing influences from your parents' fears, your culture's norms, your early traumas, your society's rules. Most of what you call my way of seeing things is a patchwork of inherited patterns. Consciousness, however, is far more flexible than most people believe. Neuroscience confirms that the brain's wiring changes based on repeated patterns of attention, what scientists call neuroplasticity. Mystics have long said the same thing in different words. You become what you contemplate. If your attention is constantly tuned to threats, failure, it's about recognizing the enormous creative influence of your perception and choosing to expand it. The more perspectives you can hold at once, seeing both the problem and the opening it offers, the greater your ability to navigate life with both clarity and creativity. When you begin to work with your observer voice consciously, you stop being a passive passenger in the car of your life. You become the driver, and though the terrain may still have rough roads, the direction you travel and the scenery you notice changes dramatically. In the next part, we'll look at a real-world example. A woman whose career felt stagnant, not because opportunities didn't exist, but because her observer voice filtered them out before she could even see them. Her story reveals how subtle shifts in perception can ignite radical changes in reality. I once worked with a woman who, on the surface, seemed to have every reason to succeed. She was intelligent, skilled, and dedicated. Yet she came to me deeply frustrated, convinced that she was invisible at work. Her refrain was constant. I never get recognized for what I do. My contributions don't matter here. Each day, she would arrive at the office scanning for signs of being overlooked. When her boss didn't mention her by name in a meeting, it was proof. When a colleague complimented her work, she dismissed it as politeness. When her ideas were used in a project, she noted only that someone else had presented them. The pattern was airtight. Recognition either didn't exist or wasn't real. What she couldn't see was that her own observer voice had become a finely tuned instrument for detecting neglect. So finely tuned that it filtered out acknowledgement entirely. This perceptual bias didn't just color her inner experience, it shaped her behavior. Expecting to be overlooked, she began speaking less in meetings. When she did share ideas, her voice was tentative, as though bracing for rejection. She would downplay her successes in casual conversation, almost as if she were protecting herself from the pain of being ignored. These micro choices created the very conditions she feared, feeding a self-reinforcing loop. When we began our work together, I asked her to experiment with a new frame. For 2 weeks, her only task was to notice any form of recognition, no matter how small, and record it. This included indirect acknowledgments, supportive gestures, even moments where someone used her ideas without immediate credit, but to positive effect. At first, she struggled. Her old patterns wanted to reject anything that didn't match her story. But as the days went on, she began to notice that recognition had been present all along. It simply hadn't fit the narrow definition her observer voice had been broadcasting. Once her perception widened, her behavior shifted naturally. She started speaking up more confidently, contributing in ways that invited engagement rather than deflecting it. Within a month, her manager acknowledged her strategic thinking in a team meeting. Soon after, she was asked to lead a high-visibility project. This wasn't a stroke of luck, it was quantum cause and effect. Her shift in observation altered her energetic presence, which in turn changed how people responded to her. The recognition she had been chasing arrived, not because her environment had suddenly transformed, but because she had. This principle works in the opposite direction too. Think about someone you know who always seems to attract problems wherever they go. They may call themselves realists, but their observer voice is tuned to the frequencies of frustration, delay, and disappointment. In a restaurant, they notice slow service before they notice the warm greeting. In traffic, they focus on the red lights and miss the green. They're not unlucky. They're simply masters at scanning for what's wrong, and the quantum field obliges by giving them an endless supply of proof. Then there are those who seem to effortlessly invite opportunity. They aren't blindly optimistic. They've trained their observer voice to scan for openings and connections. Delays become chances to think. Challenges become invitations to grow. Setbacks are reinterpreted as redirections. Their reality bends toward possibility because they keep their frequency tuned there. The difference between these two types of people is not circumstance, it's perception. And perception can be trained. In the next section, we'll explore how to begin this training, shifting from unconscious habitual observation into conscious, empowered perception. It's not about pretending life is perfect. It's about choosing the lens that allows you to see and create more than you ever thought possible. The first step in transforming your observer voice is not to force it into cheerful compliance, but to build a relationship with it. For most people, the instinct is to attack unwanted patterns. I have to stop thinking this way. But that's like trying to silence a loyal guard dog without first understanding why it's barking. Your observer voice didn't develop its habits randomly. It learned them for reasons that once made sense. Perhaps it scans for threats because, in your childhood, vigilance was necessary for safety. Maybe it expects rejection because you've lived through moments where connection was withdrawn without warning. These patterns, while limiting in the present, were often adaptive in the past. The goal is not to erase them, but to expand their range. Instead of seeing only potential danger, you also want the ability to notice potential opportunity. This is the heart of conscious observation, the shift from simply having thoughts to choosing how to witness them. Imagine your awareness as a mountaintop. Unconscious observation keeps you in the valley, seeing only the narrow view between two ridges. Conscious observation lifts you higher, revealing the full landscape, the rivers of possibility, the forests of growth, the paths you never knew existed. When you observe unconsciously, your inner voice runs on autopilot, repeating the same familiar stories. And because your attention keeps landing on the same details, those details keep defining your reality. Conscious observation interrupts that loop. It says, I see the old story, and I'm also willing to see something else. One way to practice this is to catch yourself in the act. In a moment of stress, pause and ask, what perspective am I in right now? If it's fear, resentment, or hopelessness, don't condemn it. Instead, notice it with curiosity. What is this perspective protecting me from? What else might be true here? By doing this, you create a gap, a space in which a new choice can emerge. Over time, this choice becomes second nature. Your observer voice begins to operate with more flexibility, able to hold multiple interpretations of an event without collapsing into the most familiar one. You stop being trapped in the either-or of good or bad, success or failure, and start living in the yes and of reality, acknowledging challenges while also sensing the opportunities they contain. This is what I call quantum vision, the ability to see both what is and what could be at the same time. It's not blind optimism. It's a skillful, deliberate expansion of your perceptual field. And in the quantum model, the wider your perception, the more potential outcomes you have access to. In the next part, we'll look at one of the most overlooked tools for upgrading your observer voice, the language you use. Because in the same way that your observation shapes your reality, your words shape your observation. Change your language, and you change your lens. Your observer voice does not operate in silence. It speaks in language, and language is not neutral. Every word you think or say carries a vibration, a frequency that resonates in both your nervous system and the quantum field around you. The stories you tell yourself are more than mental monologues. They are blueprints, each phrase etching patterns into the possibilities that will appear. Your words don't just describe what you see, they determine what you will see next. When you speak from limitation, you narrow your perceptual field. When you speak from possibility, you train your awareness to notice openings that were invisible before. Over time, these shifts in attention accumulate, altering both your inner state and the opportunities that appear in your outer life. Practicing conscious language is like tuning an instrument. At first, the changes are subtle. You replace one phrase with another, catch yourself mid-sentence, and choose a more open frame. But with repetition, the tone of your entire internal broadcast changes. And as it does, the quality of the realities you collapse into being changes with it. In the next section, we'll expand beyond the personal, exploring how your observer voice influences not only your own reality, but also the collective field of human consciousness, shaping the shared world we all inhabit. Your observer voice doesn't just ripple through your own life. It extends into the shared ocean of human awareness. Every thought, every interpretation you broadcast feeds into what scientists of consciousness call the collective field. This isn't poetic metaphor. Studies on group meditation, mass intention experiments, and social psychology all point to the same truth. The quality of individual consciousness influences the wider human environment. When you consistently observe from fear, scarcity, separation, or victimhood, you're not only shaping your personal reality, you're also adding those frequencies to the shared pool from which others draw. You make it easier for people around you to attune to those same constricted patterns, even if they're not consciously aware of it. Conversely, when you observe from curiosity, abundance, unity, and creative possibility, you seed the field with openings others can more easily access. Your expanded awareness becomes an invisible gift. This is where the concept of morphic resonance, proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake, becomes particularly intriguing. It suggests that once a pattern of thought or behavior is established, it becomes easier for others to replicate, not because they consciously copy it, but because the collective memory of the pattern exists in a shared energetic field. In simple terms, your shifts in perception aren't isolated events. They are contagious. Quantum theory offers another fascinating lens. In the subatomic world, particles that have interacted can become entangled, meaning the state of one instantly influences the state of another, no matter the distance. If consciousness operates on similar principles, your expanded observations might not only affect those you interact with directly, but also ripple outward in ways you'll never be able to track. This understanding reframes the work of upgrading your observer voice. It's no longer just about personal fulfillment. It's planetary service. Each time you choose to see beyond old limitations, you create a new template in the collective field, a subtle map that makes it easier for others to travel that same mental and emotional terrain. This includes shifting your relationship with time. Most people's observer voice lives in history time, using past experiences as the primary lens for predicting the future. This is how it's always been, so this is how it will be. This habit keeps them in a self-perpetuating loop, recycling the same outcomes. But there is another mode, what I call possibility time. In possibility time, you release the need for your future to be a repetition of your past. You begin to observe as if each moment were entirely new, unbound by what has been. This is the not knowing mind, spoken of in Zen teachings, a state that makes room for the universe to surprise you. Operating from possibility time requires courage because it means stepping away from the security of prediction. Yet in doing so, you open yourself to futures that could never be reached through the logic of history. This is where the most extraordinary shifts happen, not only for you, but for everyone connected to you through the web of consciousness. In the final part, we'll move from understanding to practice, learning how to set the frequency of your observer voice each day and use your life as a living laboratory for conscious creation. Understanding that your observer voice shapes reality is one thing. Living from that understanding, turning it into muscle memory, is another. This is where theory becomes practice, where insight becomes transformation. You cannot upgrade your observer voice in a single epiphany. You do it through daily conscious engagement, refining the quality of your perception until it becomes your natural state. Begin each day by deliberately setting your observational frequency before the momentum of habit sweeps you into old patterns. Before opening your phone or checking the news, take a few quiet minutes to establish your broadcast. Today, I observe my life through the lens of curiosity, possibility, and creative potential. I see what is, and I welcome what could be. You are not simply affirming. You are calibrating the instrument of your awareness. Throughout the day, notice when your observer voice slips into unconscious programming, complaining, catastrophizing, predicting failure. When that happens, don't fight it. Fighting entrenched patterns often reinforces them. Instead, pause and ask, what else could be true here? What perspective would serve my highest evolution and the greatest good? This gentle redirection is more effective than force. It creates space for the old signal to fade while the new one strengthens. At night, reflect. Ask yourself, where did I successfully shift my perspective today? How did people or circumstances respond? What evidence of transformation, subtle or obvious, did I notice? These reflections train your awareness to spot proof that your practice is working, which in turn builds trust in the process. Approach every situation as a laboratory for consciousness development. Challenges are not setbacks, they are tests of your expanded observational capacity. Even small irritations, a delay, a disagreement, a missed opportunity, become invitations to refine your frequency. Each time you choose an expanded perspective over a contracted one, you're rewiring your neural pathways and repatterning the energetic instructions you send to the quantum field. Be patient. The transformation is often gradual, like water wearing away stone. Then one day, you look around and realize your entire life has reorganized itself. Relationships that once felt stagnant are alive with connection. Opportunities that seemed impossible have become inevitable, and challenges that used to overwhelm you now feel like solvable puzzles. The deepest reward, however, is not the external change, though that can be profound. It is the recognition that you are no longer a passive passenger in the vehicle of your life. You are a conscious participant in the ongoing creation of reality. You are the bridge between what exists and what could exist. Your observer voice is no longer an unconscious echo of your past. It is a finely tuned instrument of creation, aligned with your highest growth and contribution. And as you refine it, you're not only transforming your own experience, you're contributing to a shift in the collective field, making it easier for others to step into expanded awareness. The quantum field is listening. Your next observation is already shaping your next reality. Choose with care, witness expansively, create magnificently,